if you're trying to figure out how to split up a certain floor that you may have so that there's a certain amount of it that's designed like a co-working business to help you pay rent in a reliable way, but then the remaining of that net lettable area is a specific service, amenity, or experience that is unique to you. So you wanted to create a bespoke combined offering. Well, then this video is for you, because we're going to show you how to consider, all right, well, this is how much space you need to generate enough money to cover the rent that you owe, but not completely cannibalizing and taking over the floors that you have. So it just feels like a serviced office offering, but allows your unique, experiences, whatever you want to throw into that space, to attract a certain clientele and community. And recently I helped a sports tech co-working space in Los Angeles, and they're really cool. The guy's named Nate. You should check his stuff out. I'll put a link in the description. But essentially there's a whole floor of like an NBA basketball court, sports tech facilities, and then there's enough co-working to help underpin the rent of those floors. But it was interesting because you'd already have staff doing some of the sports stuff. We were able to look at how we could double dip those staff in a way that, isn't unfair to them, but actually expands their job description and their career growth opportunities to look after the co-working business as well, on top of an additional hire to cover that additional revenue that's going to be coming in. So I'm doing this video to really just from a basic angle help you understand, if you want to similarly do something, it doesn't have to be sports tech, it could be med tech, it could be it could be a chess co-working space. It could even be Pokemon cards, something that my son and I are really into right now. Just opening packs and see if we could do it, but less the pack opening, because it can I can see how it opens up the world of gambling, hoping to get cards, but more doing stuff together. Could be law firms, could be, one of the ones that I did during with JLL was a biotech medtech one with the Melbourne University. That was a great example of a specific community. This video is for you, right? Because what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to think about it in some simple steps. There's a free co-working model you can jump into and play around with and have a look, that's in the description. But today we're going to look at it from a very basic. I've got a plan here. The plan's going to be circa 2,000 square meters. So if that's square feet for you, let's call it 22,000 square feet-ish. And we're going to look at how to split this floor plan up, right? And it's not a rule of thumb approach. There's a few things that I almost want you to ask yourself if you're going to do this exercise on your own at home, or at the office, wherever you're watching this, to try and figure that out. Okay, and I've got a very basic P&L here, representing an Australian or Asian opportunity, where we're going to throw in some inputs to show you how I think about this, right? So let's say you've got the 2,000 square meter, we'll stick to the square meters just for this discussion, a 2,000 square meter floor. It's across one floor for now. It could be across multiple, same principles. You'd only just have to figure out how customer journeys and operations would change across those floors. First thing you should be asking is what your rent target is. Whether you owe it because you're paying a lease, you're under a lease agreement, you're paying to the landlord, or it's a partnership style agreement and you've got a rent hurdle or a rent target that you have to hit from this business, okay? Because the easiest way to think about it is, no matter how cool your idea is or your community is, at the end of the day, this is a commercial business, it's not a charity, right? So you reverse engineer how you're gonna design the floor based on how much money you have to make to pay rent, and then probably some for the capex that needs to be injected into the business, right? Because if you can cover that, then all of the experience stuff, I would argue, is even better, because you're not scrambling to pay rent or make money, right? Cover the money and then you can deliver an incredible experience. So you start with the rent target, and for argument's sake, if I go over to the detail side and I scroll down here, what's our current rent target? Our current rent target is $800 a square meter per year. Yeah, let's make it $850. Whoop, that pen nearly dropped. Let's say it's $850, okay? And outgoings is $110, but we'll stick to the rent target. So if we say your rent is $850 per square meter, this is net, right? So this doesn't include outs, which is, call it $110, I think I've got in the model. We now have to figure out, all right, what do I need to do so that I make enough margin, revenue to pay this rent and then make enough profit thereafter to make this worth my time, right? Or to cover the capital that I inject or the owner injects. So once you've got your 850, you need to have a general idea of what your operating costs are. If you don't, download the model that I've provided. It may not be market specific to you yet, but you can always reach out to me directly depending on what your market is. I've looked at, I mentioned Los Angeles, more recently Guatemala, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Asia Pac. I've done over 500 of those within Asia Pac itself, lots in the US. It'll be market specific, but download the model to have a look at your OPEX. But generally speaking, if you've got your OPEX sorted for a size 2,000 square meters, you're going to need about 3 staff. So I've got here a center manager, community manager, concierge. You may be able to make this leaner. So for argument's sake, I'm going to say 0.5 for the community manager. So half, 0.5. Because similar to the sports tech scenario, let's say because you've got an existing business on top of the co-working that you want to implement, you might have already 2 existing headcount or 1 servicing that. So in the sports tech consideration is all the sporty stuff. Let's say this is a law firm one. You may have a couple of law concierges and staff already servicing it. You may be able to share a headcount in that whilst you bring on the center manager and the concierge. We'll keep all these general assumptions in which are relevant to a 2,000 square meter site. You then need to identify, so if I jump already over to the simplified dashboard, because it's assumed all of these operating costs in here, which we won't go into for the purpose of this video. But if we have a look here and we look at our rent target for the landlord, already it's spitting out, you're behind rent. Ignore year 1 because that's the ramp up. So you normally get some leniency there because in a co-working style business, it takes about, 12 months. Oops, sorry. You've almost got the first 12 months to ramp up. So whether that's rent relief or the landlord goes, okay, the rent I don't expect year 1 because I recognize that you're ramping up, it kicks into year 2. If we look at year 2, the total the rent target should be $881.45 with escalations. I believe there's about a 3.7% escalation applied to the rent in this market. So according to the income that we're generating high level from this model, from the co-working, we're slightly behind. We're at 856, so there's a deficit of minus $24. So already you're like, okay, well that means I'm going to have to go at a slightly higher density than 2,000 square meters, or I'm going to have to change the pricing of the desks in the offices that I'm selling. I'm going to keep it to 6 because if you're going to be putting amenities into the floor plan, you don't want to be going denser than 6. There's certain operators out there, like the larger ones like IWG, that can achieve 5.5, and we work similarly 5.5 and below in terms of density, and therefore having more desks within the NLA. But if you're watching this video because you're putting extra stuff into the floor plan that isn't desks to make it unique to you, you really shouldn't be going below 6. It probably should be closer to 6.5 or 7, right? And in this particular market, private office desks, I think we could go higher. Let's say it's 900. In year 1 and year 2, we've got a 20% discount applied in year 1 and a 10% in year 2. Let's get rid of the discount in year 2 because we're working with a very niche product offering here. So in year 2, we'll sell it for the actual desk rate. We won't mess with the other stuff. We've got meeting room rates and everything. There almost should be here additional revenue line items that I would include representative of your other revenue streams, right? So if you're law, medtech, biotech, education, sports tech, you're going to be able to generate income because you're booking classes, coaching lessons, you're selling courses online linked to your brand. What is that ancillary and extra income? Because all of these line items here in terms of revenue that is spitting out, they're all co-working relevant. So this is the advantage here that you have where you can stack the co-working with the extra revenue that you have. Even as a hotel operator, if you look at a floor and you're like, oh, sorry, this just went to sleep. Is that still recording? No, I need to record again. So even if you're a hotel operator and you're wondering, oh, what does it look like for the co-working side, you're still going to be generating money, whether it's through food and beverage, whether it's your conferencing and events, all that kind of stuff. So there's additional line items that you can put in here to add, to improve your revenue, right? So I almost would increase the ancillary revenue just for argument's sake, because I haven't built this model specific for your idea. But if I did, I'd be putting in new line items for you. Let's call it 15,000, right? Because you've got the additional stuff. So now if I go to the simplified dashboard, you can see that's quite lucrative. That's over $215 delta over the rent that you're expecting, because we went to a higher desk rate and we went to a higher ancillary revenue, to the point where you could be like, hey, okay, well, realistically, I think let's go with 800, let's go less than the desk rate, and we'll go 6.5 in terms of density, right? Because I want even more space to claw back for that amenity. Okay, this looks doable. We're around 881, so we're above the rent, $4.50. And in this scenario, the landlord is fronting the capex in this market because they're applying a tenant incentive to kind of get you in to deliver this offering, which covers majority of the capex, right? And then they might have, I think I've got here, $600K left over after their TI that the landlord will put in because they want this particular offering within their building. Or if you're fronting the capital yourself, then what we would want to do is relook at the rent and reduce it, or do some sort of capex sharing arrangement with the owner. Different scenario, but we can talk about that another time. This is more if the capex is sorted with the landlord, right? But if we go back to what the detailed model looks like, if we go, okay, we've got 308 desks. So if we got a 6.5 at 2,000 square meters, we've got circa 308 desks. Normally we apply that to, so 308, I'd say in this format, amenity format, we've got 246 desks in private office. 308 minus 246. We've got 62 open plan, which is important because if you're an amenity orientated offering, the open plan desks will be important to have foster some form of community. Open work, you know, a petri dish of ideas, but okay, why are you bringing all these people together? What's the common theme, and are there areas that they can just kind of work amongst one another in a bit of a chaotic but innovative manner? So if we look at even just the private office desks, 246, this is where it gets interesting, right? So in terms of the NLA distribution, the rule of the 6.5, to help explain this square meters, is a co-working industry standard, which you divide the total NLA, in this case 2,000 by 6.5 to get your 308. That doesn't mean every desk has literally 6.5 square meters around it. It accommodates circulation, co-working amenities that are specific to a general co-working layout, like, you know, concierge services, meeting rooms, a lounge area, an event space, all that kind of stuff. Fit out, buffer, blah, blah, blah. So because we're looking at this from a different lens, not just co-working, but something specific to you, we'll do it this way, where we're like, okay, in order for us to get close to our rent target of $850, we need 246 desks through private office, kind of going through the rent target to the density now to the NLA distribution. Let's say around out of the 246 desks, just to get an idea of how many offices take up that NLA, we'll multiply that by 3.25 in terms of, you know, it's around 3 to 3.5 square meters around a workstation. So now if we're thinking about a particular private office desk, it's more than 3.3 to 3.5. So if I take 3.25, just to get a general idea of, okay, if we've got 246 desks in private offices, how much area is that going to take? Not including circulation outside of the offices, not including all the other amenities, we've got, call it 800 square meters for the private office. And what percentage is that? Percentage 800 divided by 2. So 800 divided by 2,000, we're talking 40% of 2,000 square meters. So that's helpful because now you can visualize your floor plan. And let's say this is the floor plan here. Around 40% of that is going to be allocated to private offices, which means 1,600, which means 1,200 square meters is left over. And generally, you know, let's call it 2,000 times 15%. 15% is normally circulation. So minus 300 square meters circulation. So we've got about 900 square meters left to do cool shit with, right? Which is quite generous when you're dealing with co-working, but again, it's because you're generating income from the other stuff that you're doing, right? So if we look at this now, that would generally mean if this is the entrance, you'll have your concierge, very, very obvious. You'll probably have, to represent the 40%, this area colored in, and maybe up to here as office. So that's your private office. And you can do this properly once you figure out your square meterages. So that's about 40% of the NLA, which means the remainder of 900 square meters, what are you going to do with your cool stuff? Maybe this comes up to here actually into the office. You've got all this other area to do cool stuff. So if we're going to use an example of a content creator studio, okay, where you're working with a lot of not just social media content creators, but also corporate content creators, you've got this area now to play around with to help achieve your rent, to do cool things, because all these private offices here, that's what's going to hit your rent target. You might have in this area here, you know, a private event space, depending on how big you want it, you know, 30 to 50p to generate some margin. Here, you might have something amenity specific to you. So if it was a content creator version, it could be, well, it's quite close to the event space, so you don't want that traffic, but it could be some sort of innovation lounge, a general area where people can feel creative. You might have open plan workstations here, because remember, we've got about 62 open plan desks that we want to put there. You might have little, depending on how thick the circulation is, on either side of these cores, whether it's phone booths or some sort of media studio. Here you'll have like a work cafe up here, another amenity pocket there, another amenity pocket maybe in these corners here, because even though it looks tight, you'll have circulation moving around there. This is how you need to think about it, right? I know that this is starting to look really messy, but this is how I would think about it. If you have a specific floor where you need co-working to cover a certain revenue target, follow the process I just went through, very high level. If from there you need more help, reach out, but download some of the free resources that I've got on my channel and start there. But yeah, I'll stop there because it is a bit of a rabbit hole, but I do think this will help anyone out there considering what this could look like. So hopefully that's helpful, and I'll speak to you again soon.